Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells, and I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction. And I also talk about role playing games on the internet. Today, I'm going to talk about the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, which takes the Magic the Gathering setting of Ravnica, where they've done at least two and I think three or four sets, and turns it into a D&D setting. And it's very cool. So I do not have standard caveat. I don't have the PDF for this. What I have instead is the D&D Beyond page. So let's look at D&D Beyond. Actually, before we get into D&D Beyond, let's come back here and talk to you a little bit about Ravnica. So this, as I said, started as a Magic the Gathering setting. And it was specifically designed as one of their multicolor settings. And they came up with this idea of doing a bunch of two-color cards. Magic has 5 colors, and each color has a distinct kind of style or personality that they deal with. And so there are then 10 two-color combinations. So there's red, black, blue, white, green, and you can combine any of those colors with any other color, and you get 10 two-color sets. So the way they did it with Ravnica is they called it guilds. Each two-color set is a guild. The city of Ravnica, the world of Ravnica, is a giant planet-sized city. It's the Coruscant of Magic the Gathering. And so there's no wilderness, though there is portions of like rundown or destroyed city that kind of sort of function as wilderness. But in general, you're in a giant city, and every aspect of life is controlled by one of these guilds. And the guilds are super cool. Ravnica is, without question, without hesitation, the most successful and most popular setting Magic the Gathering has ever dealt with. They go back to it over and over again because people love the guilds, people love the way the city is laid out, and it is a super cool setting. Years ago, when I applied for a job as a creative person at Wizards, which I did not get. Let's point that out right up front. One of the things, Ravnica was fairly new at the time, and one of the things that we talked about internally was, doing other games in Ravnica. I'm glad that they've finally had a chance to do that, which is awesome. So I also, back when I also almost wrote books for Wizards once, and we had worked out a deal and we had everything in place, and then Hasbro canceled their fiction line for a time. The book I was going to write was also a Ravnica book. So this is a setting that I've dealt with a lot, and that I've worked with, behind the scenes as well as in front of the scenes. I have since actually written for Magic the Gathering, but that story is not out yet, so you can't read it. Ha! It wasn't for Ravnica, though. It was for something else. Anyway, let's get into this, and let's talk about Ravnica. Where are we? Oh, yes. Website. So, there's a lot of other things in the book that are not just guilds. There's different kinds of races that you can be. Notably, Loxodon, Centaur, Goblin, Vidalcan, Minotaur, like these are kind of core player races in Ravnica where they typically are not in other things. And most of these you're going to know exactly what they are. Loxodon is basically an elephant person, which is pretty rad. And they've got these kind of neat little powers that they can do. They have their own little personalities. And then they have natural armor and a trunk. So you can pick stuff up with your trunk. That's pretty cool. Let's look at Vidalcan real quick. Vidalcan is kind of like, I don't know, they're blue. They're not elves. They fill a similar role in my mind to like the Kalashtar of Eberron. They're the kind of thoughtful, sneaky, mind power kind of species. And so, yeah, we've got things like cool rationality, reasoning toward perfection, and, their kind of thing here is they're partially amphibious, and they are very precise and impassionate. They're scientist kind of people. They're thinkers and doers. They're very blue aligned. If you are familiar enough with Magic to know what blue does. Let's take a look at Simic hybrids as well. Simic is one of the guilds, and we'll get to them in a minute. They are blue and green, which is the combination of like reason and nature. And the way that this plays out in the guilds is that they are like the mad scientists. Well, there's two mad scientist guilds. These are the geneticists. These are the ones who build monsters, and they also can create people. I love the way they have done this race specifically for the D&D book, because their kind of class feature is that you have animal powers. And so you have, at first level, you can pick one of these, and then you just start with that. And then as you go up to 5th level, then you get to pick one of these other ones. And so, there's not a ton of a ton of variation there. You get 3 choices at level 1 and 3 choices at level 5. But that still gives you a lot of variability in the sense that you are customizing your character. That you started off as a human or an elf or whatever it is. And, you can just kind of pick whatever your background was. But then you get to decide, well, do I want to be really good at climbing? Do I want to breathe underwater? Do I want to have these cool fins? And just kind of go from there, give yourself neat things, come up with your own concept of what you look like and where these powers came from. If you've got grappling appendages, are those tentacles? Are they spider legs? Is it a loxodon trunk? Like, there's a lot of different ideas there, which I think are really fun. Anyway, let's go back to the main thing. And it's got a couple of subclass options, but it doesn't have any new classes. Eberron has the Artificer. This is just kind of core classes. What it does have, though, is the guilds, and the guild section is enormous. So let's take a quick look at the guilds, and I am absolutely going to be using, for this, Magic the Gathering nomenclature. So if you don't know, here's a super brief overview of the colors. We'll start with red. Red is about passion, red is about speed, red is about damage and power and kind of recklessness. Then there's black. Black is death. Black is control over things. Black is not necessarily evil. The way people typically use black magic to mean evil. That is not the case in Magic. Black can be good, other colors can be evil. It's not a moral thing, it's just a what kind of powers and attitudes you have about those powers. So regeneration, zombies, vampires, life stealing, those kinds of things that we, to be fair, typically think of as evil. That's how black works. Next up is blue. Blue is about reason. Blue is about trickery. Blue is about logic, counter magic, that kind of thing. Playing tricks and pranks, doing things your opponents don't expect, finding deceitful ways around the problem. That's blue. Next, then we get white. White is kind of unity and community in a way. Again, just like black is not evil, white is not good, but it does have, the angels and the healing and things that we typically associate with goodness. So if you have a bunch of little tiny soldiers that all work together to take down a big monster, that's a white principle. So this idea of working together, which on the good side can be teamwork and on the bad side can be fascism. Like, both of those are white traits. And then last of all, green. Green is nature. Green is about growth. Green is about... It can also do some regeneration, and it helps you get more magic power. That's a very green thing. But just basically big, huge monsters that step on people, that's also a very green thing. So there you go. That's how the powers work. So let's take a look at the guilds. So, okay, I lied to you. Before we get into the guilds, there's one thing that I do want to say about this setting, which is that as a card game, Ravnica works pretty flawlessly as the setting for a card game. These 10 guilds control, allegedly, every facet of life in the world of Ravnica. And they do it in a really interesting way, and all of the guilds are cool in their own way. Once you translate that into a setting and you start reading this book that has all of the descriptions of what each guild is like and how they interact with each other and which parts of the society they govern, it starts to fall apart just a little bit. Most notably with, I would say, Rakdos. Where's Rakdos? Right here. Rakdos is it's black and red, so it basically is all about death and damage and recklessness and sacrifice. It's not a very stable color combination, which resulted in not a very stable guild. Ostensibly, in the world of Ravnica, the cult of Rakdos are like entertainers, which makes sense. One of the guilds ought to be in charge of entertainment, right? Except these are all like, imagine if all of the entertainment in the world was BDSM, and then you might die if you watch it. Like, it's ridiculous. The idea that that is a guild on par with the rest of them really falls apart once you look at the world in any detail and try to reconcile it with how societies actually function in real life. So just ignore that and pretend that Rakdos makes sense, even though it doesn't. Gruul is very similar. Gruul is green and red. So again, red is just problematic in general in terms of because they've really leaned into the recklessness of it. So green and red is like the barbarians and the big stompy monsters and that kind of thing. There's really no explanation given, certainly no plausible explanation, why the Gruul clans or the cult of Rakdos are like functioning members of society that contribute to the greater good. They exist because all things are in balance, but they don't actually, they don't contribute to the society in general. And this book, try as it may, doesn't really reconcile those facts. Anyway, that caveat gone, let's move on, because this is an awesome setting and all of the guilds are fun even when they don't make sense. So, the Azorius Senate, this is the government. Sort of the police force, but not really. It has a different police force later on. So in terms of blue and white, that's all about control. It's all about telling people what to do. It's all about freezing them when they don't do what they're told. And so there's a lot of fun things you can do with Azorius. They were one of my favorite guilds to play because if you just want to be that person who sits in an ivory tower and tells people, no, you can't do that, that's what Azorius does. Very paladin-y, very cleric-y. You can do a lot of fun stuff with them. One thing that I do like a lot here is they have... every guild has a feature. So if you align your character with one of the guilds, then you have this feature. And it's not necessarily a power. And a lot of them are just, when you're in a certain part of town, you can find a place to stay. But the one for Azorius is you have your badge basically, and you can get people to let you into places. You can get away with stuff because you can hold up your badge and say, "I'm part of the Azorius Senate. You got to let me go." And everyone's like, "Well, I guess we do. They're the government." So Azorius is fun in that sense. If I click next chapter, is it going to take me to the next guild, or is it going to take me to the? Yeah, okay. So Boros. Boros is red-white. The idea of order coming from chaos. This is the police force, sort of, quote unquote, and they are, they're all about, order from chaos. They're going to keep control over the population. They're going to keep the city in line. They're going to do that through kind of red-aligned values like fire and, charging into battle. Very white. White is very defensive. Red is very aggressive. Boros is kind of a combination of both. And so you can see how that one gets kind of fun. You can do a lot of stuff there. There's backgrounds for all of these guilds, and all kinds of stuff. How to build them, what kinds of you know races and what kinds of classes would typically apply. But you can make this all up, and you can just absolutely go off book and do something else. So yeah, here's one of those things. Like if you are a Boros character, you can requisition some basic equipment and you can hang out in a station wherever you need to be. You also get a very, pittance of a salary. So just little things. These are not overpowering abilities that you get. Every guild also includes, if you have spellcasting as part of your class, you get extra spells added to your spell list, which is kind of neat. So that's Boros. House Damir, blue-black. This is all about sneakiness and underhandedness and hiding in the shadows. Okay? This is one of my favorite ones. I am a very blue-black-green kind of person, and so those are the ones that I play, plus Azorius because I had some good cards for it. Damir is all about infiltrating things. These are the thieves, these are the burglars, these are the spies. They serve a vital function in society in that they are the ones who know things and keep the other guilds in line by, I guess they're the Scorpion clan of Ravnica in a way. So, hooray for Damir. Let's have a look next at Goalgari. This is black-green, life and death, which means they're all about regeneration and fungus and kind of wild, creepy growth. They control the Undercity. Their leaders are things like Gorgons. Their monsters are things like giant, swamp monsters, sewer monsters, crocodiles, and dark elves. And if there's a picture of it, they've got a lot of fungus monsters as well. I didn't show you this. There's these cool characteristics. And every guild has these. So if you're building a character from one of the guilds, well, here are some kind of, if you want to use these personality traits. There are core ones in the core book, but there's different options for all 10 guilds in here, which is great. So the kind of personality traits, ideals, bonds you can form with other people, flaws that you might have, different contacts that you might have within your guild, without your guild. You work for Goalgari, but one time you helped this Azorius person, and now they're going to help you. So there's a lot of options here. Oh, here we go. So there's one of the Gorgons that leads them. This is a Celestia person, and this is a Goalgari. So the Goalgari are rad, and I love them. I usually end up playing Goalgari when I play the card game. Gruul, like I said before, these are red-green. They're the barbarians. They live in what passes for wilderness in the world of Ravnica. So, empty lots, which sometimes can be city-sized empty lots because a city was destroyed and it hasn't been rebuilt yet. Well, in those ruins, in that quote-unquote wilderness, live the Gruul clans. They love to fight because they're red. They are also very big, and they grow and they heal because they're green. And so if you want to be a druid, if you want to be a ranger, if you want to be a barbarian, Gruul is a good option for you. And like I said, you can be any of the classes, regardless of which guild you're in. But that's how they work. Izzet is red-blue. This is the other mad scientist one that I was talking about. It's all about intellect and logic and reason and invention. And it's also about kind of recklessness. So reckless invention. So these are things that are going to blow up in your face, but you're going to try to build them anyway. They're artificers. They come up with new things. They come up with new forms of magic. A goblin who is looking at a little beaker full of weird magical stuff that's boiling. That's the perfect image for Izzet. That's kind of what they're about. They're very steampunky in that they tend to have these goggles on. They also tend to have kind of neat little objects. In fact, I'm going to show you one real quick because I think it's fantastic. Here in the treasures, a Mysium apparatus. It looks like this. It's kind of like big, huge magic gauntlets that you wear, and then they connect to by hoses to a thing on your back. And they will give you the chance to cast extra spells that you don't actually have. But if you fail the DC, random spells will happen instead. They still use your spell slots. They're relatively balanced in that way. But it's a very is-it idea that you can think to yourself, well, I'm just going to go for it, and I'm going to do this other thing. I didn't prepare this spell today, and it's not even one of the spells my class is supposed to have, but I've got these crazy magic gauntlets that the mad scientist goblin made for me, and so I'm going to try it anyway. That's is-it for you. Orzov is fascinating. It's black-white, which is the kind of, it's death and life together, but not in the same way that green is. The black-green death-life combination was all about growth. Black-white is not. Black-white is about immortality rather than regeneration and growth, and so it's all ghosts. What it is in practice is the bank. It's the financial guild, but wearing all the trappings of a church. And so while they call it a syndicate, they tend to be priests and stuff. Let's see if we can get a good picture. Come on, do you not have any pictures? There we go. So here's this, what is probably a vampire who is sitting there in judgment over somebody. And they're just a bank. They're a bank, and they control all the money. But in order to get that money, you have to jump through all these religious hoops. And they're kind of really great villains. They're a lot of fun. They have a lot of ghosts and a lot of angels, a lot of zombies. This idea of kind of the darker side of immortality. And they can tax you as well. Let's see if we can find their feature leverage. So if you have a character who's from Orzov, your class feature is basically that anyone who is also Orzov and lower than you in the organization, you can boss them around and get anything you want out of them, which is really fun, and I like it a lot. So hooray for Orzov. The Cult of Rakdos. These are the crazy circus entertainers that blow things up and break them. It does not make any sense that this is the form of entertainment that everyone on Ravnica wants to go and see. Like, there's got to be somebody out there who's writing plays or doing dance numbers that don't involve fire and demons and death. But we never hear about it because the Cult of Rakdos is in charge of entertainment. They're fun. They don't make any sense logistically, but they're fun. And so, hooray for them. Again, if you want to be a barbarian, if you want to be a warlock, if you want to deal with demons, every clan includes this little section. You might enjoy a Rakdos character if mayhem, a showy, dramatic character. You like bards and warlocks, they kind of love this kind of stuff. The idea of finding a heroic way to participate in a demonic cult sounds like a fun challenge. See, even the book recognizes that this is more challenging to reconcile in your head than it needs to be. But if you want that challenge, here you go. You can be part of this demonic cult who's also a hero and also, for some reason, a dancer. So, hooray for Rakdos. Celestia is also kind of like a church, and more cult-like in a way than the Cult of Rakdos is. This is green-white. So, again, it's all about lots and lots and lots of little things that work together to do something great. And so they it's all about nature, it's all about peace, it's all about healing. They have a lot of tree folk that are on their teams. This is where you get into centaurs and wood elves and things like that. The more spiritual, kind of peaceful side of Ravnica. And in particular, the idea that everyone is going to work together to help things. And so their special feature is, no matter where you are in the city, you can find a Celestia conclave and they will take care of you because that's their whole deal, is Celestia takes care of everybody. And then I think this is the last one, Simic. These are the geneticists that we talked about. Blue and green, they're the ones who make the hybrids. They make lots of other monsters as well. They do some neat things, and Ravnica, because it includes Izzet and because it includes Simic, has a lot of funky, high science kind of stuff that you don't typically see in a D&D setting or a magic setting of any kind. So if you like this idea of being, a druid, but instead of summoning normal things, you're summoning these weird, like, monstrosities, well, here you go. There's a whole, there's a whole guild for you. So they're talking about being curious, about prying into secrets and mysteries, using research to make the world better, tinkering with the fundamental forces of life. And let's see, what's their special feature down here? Feature researcher. Okay, so yeah, if you want to learn something about the world, you're a little better at it if you come from Simic. And so that's how it works. And their guild spells are things, like acid and poison and enlarge and reduce, alter self, ways to change the function of something. So yeah. Hooray for all of this. So those are the guilds. And pretty sure I hit them all. Did I? I did. And those are the 10 guilds, and they kind of define everything. And let's use this. It has a whole adventuring section in here where it talks about how to work with, how to put together parties. Or is it in here? This is how to use the guilds. I think what I'm looking for was actually back here. It's got a neat section on, how can you build a party if everyone comes from... Oh, these are neat also. It's got a system of renown where the higher you are in the guild, the more powers you have access to. And, like that guild features that I showed you, there's higher level ones. And every time you'll hit a certain benchmark, like 3 renown or 10 renown or 20 or whatever, then you get another extra power because you are supporting your guild, and therefore your guild is going to support you, which is great. Where's the thing that I'm looking for? Because I do like this, because your first question, I think, should be, well, how is this going to work? Like, if we're all in a guild... Here we go, building a party. Okay? This is what I wanted to show you. So... is everyone from the same guild? Or is everyone just from something else? You don't have to follow this template at all. But this is a way of saying, here's a good explanation for why people from all the different guilds are working together. Either because, like, it's a mad science party, and so you've got Simic and Izzet working together. Or it is a chaos party, so you've got Gruul and Rakdos working together. Or there's a lot of different things. If you want to have everyone kind of themed around the concept of nature, well then okay, that makes sense. If you want everyone themed around this idea of telling people how to, what to do, a law enforcement kind of thing, well then Azorius and Boros are going to work together a lot. There's also different reasons that other guilds could work together. If you want to, how is it that you know this person? If you're in the Orzov Syndicate, but someone in your group is from the Gruul clans, how do you know them? Why, what connection do you have? Come up with your own, of course, but if you need help, they've got these other things together. Maybe you have a common enemy that supports, that you're all trying to fight against, and so you've come together in order to beat them. Something like that. It also has this little questionnaire of, it doesn't make a ton of sense, but you can follow this floor chart to choose which guild is for you if you have absolutely no connection to any of the guilds. But I'm going to guess that a quick overview of the book, you're going to immediately say, oh yes, that's the one for me. I want to be the weird fungus druid who lives underground in a sewer. And well, okay, then you're Goalgari. Like, the guild flavors are strong enough, even the kind of nonsensical ones like Rakdos, that you will immediately be drawn to one of them, one or two of them. And that's one of the big strengths of the setting, and that's why people like it so much. So anyway, getting back to this creating adventures section, it has some basic ideas of like, here's how you can build adventures. You know, how are you, and this is very core level stuff. So if you have never DM'd before, this is still a great book for you. You know, the villain's activities are competing with you in some way. What are some complications? This is all very basic GM material. But then you get down here into how can you use the Azorius Senate in your adventures? Well, first we're going to tell you all about an arrestor station. We're going to give you different things you can do in that station. We're going to give you a map of what that station looks like. And then we're going to talk about what kinds of villains you can have. If your main villain for the entire campaign is Azorius, how is that going to look? What is that going to feel like? And then, you know, if your characters are Azorius, what kinds of goals and assignments and adventure hooks are going to grab their attention? And it has that for all 12 guilds, which is fantastic. And we won't go through them all right now, but that information is all there. Last of all, you know, of course, there's treasure here, and a lot of these are just actual cards. Like if you said, I really wanted to see the Sword of the Perrons and use it, well, now you have D&D stats for it because you love the card. Hooray. More interesting to me is this kind of monster section, because a lot of the monsters in Ravnica are very unique, and you haven't come across them before in other D&D settings. So sphinxes are a big deal. So here's a bunch of sphinx stuff. And then, of course, everything's guild related. So if you want to fight against monsters of Azorius, here's all the monsters that are most closely aligned with Azorius. And it has that for every guild, which is great. Then you get to the next section, which is other beasts and the kind of the typical ones. So Boros angels, those red-white angels, they're going to be very different than a core book D&D angel. So here's stats for them. You know, it isn't often that we see, and I know there's a Celestial that has fire powers, but here's their own version of it, okay? Here's the Ravnica version. And then it has the Orzov angels. How is the black-white angel going to be different from the other angels? They're so cool. I love the whole look of Orzov. I'm a very black-aligned player, as you can tell. And then it's got, I wanted to show you, the little Simic monsters. Show me some Simic monsters. Where are those? Felidar. I think they're called the Crawl. Let's try that. Horrors and lots of rules for how to do horrors and how to make all the horrors different from each other. Weirds. Here's one that I definitely wanted you to see, but I just assumed it would be in the W section. A weird is like an elemental thing that combines different elements together. So this weird is fire and water together, the blister coil weird, and it has some cool elemental powers coming from two different elements at the same time, which is a lot of fun. Then there is the flux charger weird, which again is two totally different elements that work together in a different way. Galvanize is another one. So those are neat. Crassus, this is the Simic monsters, and it has several different kinds of kind of genetically engineered monstrosities that Simic has created, and then they either use or they have escaped, and you need to get them back. So that's what Simic has got. And then way at the end is where you've got the stats for. Ooh, I love this one. The Nivix Cyclops. This is an Izzet Cyclops. So imagine a Cyclops that is completely encased in some kind of clockwork steampunk magic armor, and it's got like special lens because it needs to make up for the fact that it doesn't have good depth perception, and it's got these other little all of the strength of a Cyclops with some extra magic power thrown on top of it. They're a super cool thing. Here's some more Simic monsters and hybrids and things. There's some flying animals, thralls. Here we go, Undercity Medusas. I'm a big fan of Goalgari, as you can tell, and their leaders tend to be Gorgons. And so here's some really neat Gorgon things. And then at the end, of course, we get different kinds of vampires. There's the Blood Drinker vampire, which is more of an Orzov idea. And then there's the Mind Drinker vampire, which is more of a Damir, this psychic vampire that can siphon your thoughts right out of your head. So, anyway, Ravnica is a fascinating setting. It is one that has been developed for a different game, for Magic the Gathering, over years and years. And like I said, they've done at least 3 sets set in Ravnica that I know of. And so you get all that richness of history, all of those details, all of this incredible diversity and variation between the guilds and what they do and how they do it. And they've ported that all into D&D in a way that works really well. The flavor of the setting comes across. It really captures your imagination to think to think of society in terms of the guilds and what the different guilds are going to do, how your character, your kind of standard, druid is going to be different in a world that has no wilderness, that is a giant city, and then might be aligned with Goalgari, or it might be aligned with Simic, or it might be aligned with any of the guilds, and how that is going to take this same core identity of druid and then give it 10 remarkably different flavors depending on how you want to do it. So Ravnica is a great setting. I like it a lot. I'm excited to get a chance to play it sometime. I would really love to do an adventure or a whole campaign in the Ravnica setting because it is such a fascinating world. And in fact, some of the other typecast players and I have talked about doing a Ravnica campaign, possibly when we're done with Veyron. I don't know if that'll happen. I don't know what we're going to do when we're done, or even when our typecast campaign will end. But when it does, we will do something in Ravnica as a frontrunner because it is such a great setting. So anyway, thank you very much for watching this. You can get the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. You can get that through D&D Beyond like I did. There's also physical books for it. And it is a really cool setting, and I think you will like it a lot. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you later.